All right, guys, so today is a monumental day here at DDE, and let me tell you why. Today, something that we've been working on for the last year and a half, that's the F12. We are going to fire up that car today. It is going to be running if everything goes well, which I hope it does, because this has been a crazy process. Unfortunately, Damon isn't here today, so you guys are gonna see the first fire up with Damon at the same time. He's literally gonna be watching this when you guys are watching it. Let me show you where we're at with the car. It's not completely done yet, and there's a reason why it's not done yet, but let's walk in here, let's check out the car. I'll show you all the stuff that we've actually completed and what else we have to do today. I don't know if you guys remember this entire build. It started out, like I said, a year and a half ago, where we had actually a twin turbo F12. It was a running street car, but there were some issues with it, and we wanted to take it to the next level, and the next level not being here, but being here, right? As crazy as we possibly could go with this car, and that's what we've done. Over the last year and a half of building this one-of-one twin turbo Ferrari F12, it is an absolute insane build. Planning on this thing making over 1,500 horsepower to the wheels. Every single component on the car has been either worked over or completely customized. And so much, literally, blood and sweat. Not many tears. I hope that doesn't change today, unless it's a happy tear. Let me break down the process of what we have to do in order to start this car up today. And it's a pretty involved, pretty detailed technical process. We have to check all of the systems. Right now we have 2 PDMs. The PDMs are power distribution modules. They replace all the fuses and all of the relays. It's all a solid state computer now that's controlling everything. So those have to be completely programmed off of what G did on the wiring harness. So every single thing that gets power needs to get power from a certain pin. Shane T is over there starting to get all that stuff dialed in. It's a pretty involved process because literally you're starting with a blank slate. You have 60 outputs and none of them have been programmed. So going through that entire process and then telling the ECU, what is the crank signal? What's the crank sensor? How many teeth are on the flywheel? Is it a rising edge signal or a falling edge signal? There's so many things that need to be programmed in there. And then we got to go through and test each one of the injectors manually. Number 1, does that fire? And then same thing with all of the coils. Is that coil number 1? Does it fire? And we're going to check all of these things before we even put any fluids in the car. When we get to that point, then we're going to put oil in it, we're going to crank it over, and we're going to build oil pressure. Not try to start it, but we're going to build up the oil pressure, make sure that everything looks good there. Then we'll put fuel in the car, turn on the fuel pumps, make sure we don't have any leaks. There's just a lot of steps that we have to take to make sure that we don't have any issues. And if we have any issues, the car isn't completely buttoned up and done. That's why everything is kind of off of the car right now, so we can check all of those things before we try to start it. These two guys behind me, Greg and Shane T, both of these guys used to work for Motec. They worked for Motec for years and years, and then eventually went off to do their own thing. Shane, this is the first time I'm actually working with Shane, and the real benefit is that Shane, not only is he just an absolutely amazing tuner, but he's already done a few Ferrari V12s. So he's got a really good idea of everything that needs to happen to make this engine run properly. And that's not an easy task, because this thing has 4 cam controls and 4 cam sensors, and all of these things need to be completely in sync to not have any errors, to not have the valves touch the pistons. This is critical stuff here that we're dealing with, and obviously an insanely expensive custom Ferrari V12 engine that we put these turbos on. Yeah, I have a lot of faith in these guys. Obviously, things can happen. Things can go wrong. There might be a wiring pin that is flipped in a sensor, but that's easy. That's why Greg's still here, because if there's any issues, he can tackle it right there. We literally have like the best guys in the business working on this car right now. All right, you guys ready to power it up? All right, here we go. Check this out. That looks so sick, sitting there in the center. So right now it's going through like all the options of what the display can look like, and you can even customize it more than that. Damon, when he's driving, is gonna be able to see it, but when we put the in-car video from when we do these Gymkhana videos and testing and all of that, you guys are gonna be able to see exactly what is happening on the dashboard as far as brake pressures, if it's e-brake, clutch pressure, RPM, oil pressure, fuel pressure, all that stuff is gonna be on that display, and you guys get to see everything that's going on. Throttle position, all the good stuff.
Yo, I cannot wait to get this thing started. I can't wait to hear what it sounds like. All that work that Sean and Mike did building those headers and then that X pipe, I hope it sounds super crazy, but first, Mike's gotta put this trans in.
All right, so I am bolting the clutch and flywheel in right now. We actually had the whole thing together with the drive shaft and everything in, but there was a problem. The starter ring gear was in the wrong spot. It was a little bit too far back, and that caused it to hit the bell housing, and it wasn't gonna make full engagement with the starter gear. Luckily, took the flywheel out, brought it over to the guys that made it, and they machined it real quick, moved the gear to where it needs to be, and it's all good now. So we're gonna reassemble this, get the transmission back in the car, get the drive shaft in and all that stuff. Having all that stuff on here will allow us to start the car up, make sure this thing runs properly.
So Mike, which part of the F12 do you think took the most time for you?
The exhaust system, the headers and the X pipe and mounting the turbos and all that stuff we spent a lot of time on that to make it exactly how I wanted, to try to get that V12 scream back in this thing. I just hope that it actually is gonna work and it is gonna sound the way I think it's gonna sound.
The amount of work and cool little details we put into this thing, even just the way that we designed the headers, I can't wait to hear the fruits of our labor.
Just find out what it really is. And dude, we ended up like 3 different ones when we were on the dyno with it. So we were bouncing all around.
We're just confirming the firing order. One thing is the location of the cylinders, which is kind of odd on Ferrari. So usually the cylinder head that's further forward, because all of the pistons are basically offset, because you can't have 2 rods that are connected in the same spot, right? So they have to be offset. On every other manufacturer of every other engine I've ever seen, the furthest forward cylinder is number 1, but that's not the case on Ferrari engines. Their number 1 is actually the front cylinder that's further back, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on this side, and then it doesn't go 7 here. 7 is back here. So then it's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 is this cylinder. Very odd and very difficult to find any information on these engines. I was able to figure out when I pulled the engine apart which one was top dead center by checking where the pistons were and looking at the marks for the cam to set the cam timing up properly. So luckily I did that before we pulled the engine apart. Otherwise the engine cam timing would literally be off by the V degrees, which is 65 degrees. If you put this piston up at top dead center and set the cam timing there, it would be completely off. The engine would definitely not run right, probably not even start at all.
Come on, Jason, let's see what you got. You got the Pelote shift on, man. Show some respect. Drive on the track. How are you guys? While we're waiting to see the twin turbo F12 start up for the very first time, we need to thank today's sponsor, and it is Pelote. The handmade driver's shoe from Portugal out of Italian suede. Mwah. Hey! It's the best driving shoe out there. Super comfortable, great pedal feel. Now, if you play soccer, you wear a soccer shoe. If you play basketball, you wear basketball shoes. And if you are a driver, you wear the Pelote Shift. This is Tennessee Pine, and that is the black suede on white. This is featured right now, and you guys can get them too. So all you have to do is go to pelote.com and use code DD15.
Also, worldwide shipping is added now. So some
Worldwide.
people overseas can get them. Now you can be a true driver with your Pelotes. Those fancy designer shoes charge over $1,000 for a pair of shoes of the same quality. These ones, with our code, are under $150. They make driving more fun, with more feel, more engagement, and importantly, more control. They also just added worldwide shipping, which means everybody can show their friends they're a true driver with Pelote Shift. Right now, you guys, don't waste any time. Go to pelote.com and use code DDE15 to get 15% off site-wide.
So you guys, click the link in the description and go and pick up a set of Pelote Shifts. Get your favorite color. Tag us on social media, and we'd love to see what you guys chose at the end of the day. Also, I can't wait to wear my Pelotes for the first time in my twin turbo F12. It's gonna start, you guys. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but Dave and I are watching just like you are from home. We'll see you guys.
Six, 9, 11, 12.
Wanna see how much oil filters cost for Ferraris? Well, usually it's 137, but they gave it to us for 110. So,
Nice, guys.
you know, I am gonna have to do something that I did not want to do. I got a drill bit and I'm gonna drill a hole in the Mad Sweden intake manifold because I gotta put an air temp sensor in there. The best place for it is right here in the bottom near the back. That's going to hide all the wiring. It's gonna give us a really accurate temperature reading inside of the manifold. It's not mating against a machine surface with like an O-ring seal or a washer. So if it's off by a half a degree, it's not gonna matter, but I want it to be right. So I'm gonna take a little bit of time and just make sure that we got it in there straight. While I'm putting these O-rings in to put the intake manifold on, just thinking back over all the years that I've been working on cars and thinking about how I've seen the process of people tuning cars go before, when they didn't really know what they're doing or they were trying to rush it and skip steps, and I can guarantee you it never ends well. I've seen cars blow up on the dyno like pretty immediately because something was skipped in the tuning steps. Something was wrong as far as which coil was firing at which time, or the base timing was off by 10 or 15 degrees. There are just so many things that have to be perfect for the engine to run right. That's why this takes a while, and that's why we have the best guys in the business working on this car. There's literally no room for error. If you're off by a couple percent, that can mean the difference between this engine running perfectly for a long time and this engine blowing up after a day of driving. All right, so I'm gonna put the first side of the runners on. The way that all of this is designed, it has to go in one at a time. Basically all the injectors need to get plugged in. Then I can do the same thing, get the other one over here, plug all the injectors in and drop it in place. Obviously, this does not have any throttle blades in it, so it is open. So I got these caps covering it up. So once I remove the tape from the engine, this will go on, and then this will keep any debris from going in the engine while we're getting all this ready. With the fuel in the car, turn on the pumps, get the fuel flowing through here. We'll be able to adjust the fuel pressure to what we want to set it as base pressure by adjusting that screw right there. Once all that's confirmed, then we can put the upper plenum on. It's coming together.
So I just got to finish up the fire suppression system. Basically, I made these long because we didn't know where these nozzles were going to be at first, but Mike made up the bracket this morning, placed them in the finished location. Just got to finish bending those up and placing them where they're going to finally be and mount them. But once that's done, we got these new radium jugs that are really super sick and super simple. The old ones, you had to use like a hose clamp basically, and it was kind of a pain whenever you had to fill them up. But these just screw on, which is super awesome. In a second here, we're gonna fill this tank up and test it for any leaks. Hopefully there's none.
I'm using these fittings for the air that are going to go to the fuel pressure regulator and go to the wastegates push lock fitting, and we use a Teflon hose in here. So they're heat resistant, they work really well, they're inexpensive, and disassembly and assembly is really easy. I've run these for a long time and I've had really good results with them. So they have 600-degree temperature rating. One will be for the fuel pressure and the other one is going to go forward to the boost control solenoid into the wastegates. This looks good.
Yeah, it does look good.
It looks pretty wild. Air temp sensor is good, right where I wanted it. So we're ready to put some fluids in the car, and the first thing we're gonna put in is the Ignite ethanol racing fuel. 90% ethanol race gas that I ran in my cars in Formula Drift. Continuing with the theme of only using the best stuff on the F12. I'm gonna try to put about a gallon or so in it. He's gonna calibrate the fuel level sender while we're adding the fuel.
So we just ran the fuel pumps to pressurize the system and make sure that there's no leaks. We heard like a cavitation air bubble noise, really loud, but it could just be because we tucked every single line, basically runs through the trans tunnel so that it's super neat and tidy and away from everything. Since it's in that metal tunnel, it's basically reverberating off of it and bouncing off the floor also, so that could be amplifying the noise. We're gonna check over every single line and every single fitting to make sure there's no wetness anywhere, and we didn't see anything dripped on the floor or anything, so it seems okay so far, but we're just gonna double check everything before we're basically ready to fire this thing up.
This is the Teflon tubing that I'm using for all the vacuum lines, boost lines. It fits in really nice, got an O-ring seal. It works really well, and it's really easy to use. It's time. The intake manifold is going on, which means we are one step closer to firing this thing up. Once we get this on here, I can drop the intercooler in place with the oil cooler, hook up the oil lines, put some oil in this thing, and we should be ready to crank it over and build up some oil pressure. Sometimes you gotta get physical with these things.
So are you just having fun or
Ride the bull.
oh? This is
the prancing
Ferrari.
horse. Right?
There you go.
Oil filter is in. Tighten this up.
Oh man, that's a lot of oil.
Ew.
Alright, it's time to put some blood in this thing. Google says 15.5 liters. And one of these containers is about 1 liter.
This thing is starting to look a lot more complete. We have almost all the parts on the car. Right now, I'm not gonna worry about the charge pipes connecting the turbos because that doesn't matter. All we need for the engine to run is the intake manifold. So that's on there. That should be good to go. The turbos will spin and obviously we'll be able to see them, but we're just not gonna be pushing any air into the engine, which it's not gonna do when it's running at idle anyway. And I'm going to finish this one water line here. That's a vent line. Fans are coming on, testing all the systems. Then we'll put the water in here. We're gonna crank the engine over, check for oil pressure, and then if everything looks good, next step, try to start this thing up.
Mike left that loose so it could basically push all the excess air out of the block. Now there shouldn't be any air left, or if there is, there's like small amounts that basically we'll have to get it hot. And
I'm gonna leave it loose so we can crack it and see if there's any air bubbles.
Yeah, it'll start spluttering.
I'll just put it in like finger tight, so it might still drip a little bit, but that's totally fine. So one thing that's really helpful is, especially with a rear radiator setup like this, having that extra electric water pump. We still have the mechanical pump on the engine, but with this electric pump, we can cycle the entire water system, get all the air bubbles out of it. Just makes it really easy for filling rather than trying to run the engine and worry about having air bubbles in it while the engine is running.
There's water coming out of the turbo. There's no water going in the turbo.
It's problematic.
That's a very big problem.
It got full. The intake, well, there's no intake tube on it, so that means the exhaust is full. There's a pretty good puddle under the car, but I assume it's just from,
Well, most of it was from that.
yeah, from your vent, right?
No, it's coming out of the back.
Yeah, it's coming out of the back of the turbo.
exhaust
Yeah,
housing.
that means the header is full. Seems almost impossible.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, unless you just put like 10 gallons of water in it.
No, I put 4.5.
Well, that's hard to, maybe the header will hold 4.5, but even then it has to be, there'd be cylinders with it in there.
Yeah, but I mean, the only way it can get into the back of the turbo
Agreed.
is through the exhaust.
Yeah, I'm in.
Oh, it's coming out of this one now.
Oh, now we got dual. It's because it's in the oil?
It must be like a water jacket seal in the cylinder.
Yeah, it doesn't feel oily.
Hold on, take a lambda sensor out.
Yeah, I mean, it's full. It's full for sure. So how does
There's
it
no
into
way,
the
man.
exhaust port?
That's entirely way too much water.
Needs to dry
It's
here.
coming from the oil line. The drain back or something. What size is the drain back line? Take drain back line off.
It's a -8.
We don't have any, we haven't put oil to anything, right? You're
No.
gonna probably burn your hand on that lambda sensor. Well, maybe it won't, it might not have been.
It's not that hot.
Yeah.
Water pour out of
Barely
there.
on, barely
No, it's
on.
dry.
Right. So now take the oil line off the return line on the turbo. It's either coming up through that, which is most likely, which is why it's leaking out the shaft, or it's coming from the pressure side. It's coming up the oil line, the oil return, because it's going in the pan. Even that's sketchy. I mean, the pan would hold that. I would think it would hold that.
Well, we have. I mean, yeah. Right now we have the sump or the tank full of oil, but that hasn't filled the oil pan yet.
Right. Right. Luckily, it's still over here because it hasn't been pumped.
Yeah.
Normally, the drain back is just goes. It's just leaked out of the compressor too. I think.
Yeah. Unless.
It's what it's doing is it's coming up the drain back line, and as soon as
unless that thing on top of the engine is a water line, and I thought that it was the breather line on top in the valley.
that's what it is. That's the coolant line going to the bottom of the turbo, and it's not the drain back. So take the line off the turbo and let it leak out so we can know that's what it is.
Yeah, there's water coming out of there.
Right. Then when you get rid of it, it's going to quit coming out of your turbos. You're probably going to have to plug the side coming from the engine because it's going to leak like crazy.
Well,
One
yeah,
from
it's
the turbo
gonna-
will only drain the turbo.
I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't even matter because I'm gonna have to.
You can throw under there.
I'm gonna have to put a -10 on here, but then we got to disconnect the oil lines for the turbos. So
won't come
let me
loose, huh?
see if I can find a plug.
That'll be far better.
Coming out of the center of the valley because I just take that thing off, so it could be wet in the valley.
Right.
Now, there's water dripping back here, but it could be from the center of the valley because we unplugged that line. That's what it looks like because I don't see anything on the head.
All right, so what happened was I was trying to find a place to drain the oil out of the turbos into the engine, and because it's a dry sump engine, there is no oil pan. There really isn't any good spot to get the turbo drains into it, except for what I thought on top of the valley in between the heads. On every other engine I've seen that's a V on top there, it is basically a crankcase breather area. So it would be in between the pistons and not be a water jacket. But apparently on this engine, that is part of the water system. So the water got full and basically went up the return line and into the turbos from the bottom. And that's why I was leaking out of the turbos. At least it wasn't anything with the cylinders, sleeves, or O-rings there, because that would require a complete tear down. So it's an issue. We solved that issue. We still have to figure out where to drain the turbos back. And what I was trying to avoid was putting a pump in, which is basically a pump that's running, kind of like a fuel pump, that's drawing the oil out of the turbos, bringing it over. When it's on the same level or the turbos are a little lower than the tank, you got to do that. So I think that's what we're going to end up having to do, unfortunately. For now, we've bypassed that issue. I just have the turbo drains going down with a hose into an oil pan underneath the car. So we can still build oil pressure. We can still check the crank sensor, cam sensor, and all that. And if everything goes well, then we'll still be able to fire it up. We're just gonna have a little bit of oil coming out of the bottom for the first start, which is fine. It's not a big issue. We might lose a half a quart, but in a 15, 16 quart system, it's not gonna be an issue. We're gonna move forward, and I'm gonna crank this thing over, see what happens. Ready? No, it just kind of like a couple of lights were flashing when I hit it. Like we were talking about earlier, every single one of those keypad buttons need to be programmed, and it's through a CAN bus system. So there are only 2 wires that are basically feeding all of the information from almost everything that's going on with the engine, including the keypad, the dash, all that stuff is running via the CAN bus system. So basically Shane's gonna go through and make sure that this number 2 button on the keypad is tagged to go to the starter, and in between there it has to go through the PDM. The PDM has to be told what to do, goes through an output, and then it gets to the starter. So it's not a straight shot, just one wire, like a power wire going straight to it, but he's got the laptop out, so he'll sort it out in a minute.
Yeah, we had it off earlier for safety, remember?
Yes.
So it's still off.
So you can turn off those inputs and outputs too. So it was shut off, so we didn't accidentally crank it, and it was still off, so problem solved.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me get back to DC so I can capture this.
Yeah.
Okay, some nose spins,
Sorry,
good,
yeah.
everything's decent there.
Oh, good. Cycle lock, so it would have run.
Yeah.
It's not good camera trainers,
Good.
but it's got cycle lock.
Okay, clear.
Go.
Well, the motor's spinning for the first time. All sounds good. He's got all 5 of the signals. So we have the crank sensor, which is off the flywheel, and then we have 4 cam sensors, and they are all reading. So that's a good sign.
It's so cool to hear this thing turn. I can't wait to hear what it sounds like actually running. It already sounds like it has a lot of power within it. Even though all the caps are off, so you can't really hear how much compression it's making, it seems like a big boy is ready to wake up, you know?
This has been such a long process, and I've been able to film it for the most part from disassembly till here. And I have no idea how it's going to sound. No one does, but I know it's going to be cool.
£18.
Yeah, I saw 130 here.
Somebody's got their scale off.
Who's got the
I'm guessing it's the dash.
It doesn't say PSI or what, but basically it's scaling. So you have to send the correct information to the dash, and it was just in a different form of measurement. It wasn't in PSI.
Oil pushing through the turbos now, so hopefully clears out the water that's in it.
Much
Where's it drain?
Oh, nothing, like a cap full.
Yeah, it's still pretty full, but yeah, it went down.
Yeah. Well, we got oil pressure. That all looks good. So I am putting the spark plugs in here. Tim's throwing the coil packs on. We're gonna plug it all in. And then, if everything goes to plan, which obviously would have had a few hiccups, but if everything goes to plan, this thing should fire up in the next few minutes.
Ooh, Mike, you gonna put them on there?
Everybody's gonna want to hear it with these on. We're not gonna hit the limiter right now. We're not gonna shoot flames right now, but we are gonna try to start it up. It will sound a little bit different than coming straight out of the turbo and or having these, so we'll stick them on. They're very easy.
Dude.
This is a precautionary device. So precautionary that I'll pull the pin now.
I am excited to hear this thing run, but there's so many things going on in my head right now. This is a massive project. Every single thing was custom. All right, what's going to happen? We got the oil pressure, we got the oil lines, they're tight. I don't see any leaks, but now the oil pressure is not gonna be at 30, it's probably gonna be at 80 pounds. A lot can happen right now, fingers crossed.
All right, well, the water's coming out of the turbos. All right, good. I killed it. Ready to go?
Okay, let's go. Wait.
Dude, it runs. And it honestly, just on startup, it sounds so much better than it did before. Man, what a project.
Get sprayed with water. Me, dude, what the fuck, bro?
Smells good.
It smells good, man. That Ignite smells good.
All right.
That doesn't run. That doesn't run. I'd say about half the motor's running. It's like that bank running and this one not.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of those headers are warm.
So that was a inline 6 F12. I thought it sounded a little off.
Yeah, it does sound a little like pulsy, but because it's got the X and we've got the crossover, then
It was
we're not,
spinning both, yeah.
but we're still hearing right?
sides,
both
yeah.
sides. But even though one side might not even be completely firing, so
Yeah, so then but the question is why is that one wrong?
yeah.
So it only gets better from here, Mark.
Mike pulled a long-term prank. I turned your V12 into an inline 6.
Mike likes BMWs, so.
Exactly.
It might have just been a straight 6-cylinder, only half the engine was running.
Usually if they're wrong by a rev, it'll pop out the exhaust.
Yeah,
It's not doing anything.
yeah.
So I flipped it 360, see if it starts and runs on the other half of the motor. So that's definitely wrong.
Yes.
I almost got shot.
Again? Yeah. I've got current to the coils and the injectors. It's trying to run that bank. The only way you're gonna figure it out is to take a plug out of number one. We can do the paper towel thing at least. Put the paper towel down the number one plug tube.
I mean, I can put-
tap it. And
Yeah.
make sure it blows number 12 out next. We don't know for sure where top dead center is, and we know it's similar engines, how they fire, but that doesn't mean this one does. So we're gonna do a real simple test, stick paper towel down the spark plug tubes and tap the engine over on the starter motor, and when we find number one coming out, we know we got this bank right, but we need to know that bank. Suspect that bank fires from the back to the front, not front to back. So it's not the same as the other engines. Tiny bit. Another one. See, that was 12.
Okay.
Another one. One's coming on intake, I think. Another one. Another one. Another one. Another one. There's one. Okay, so now put one in 7 or put one in everything.
So we popped 12.
12. Yeah, it
Before-
definitely does not fire.
Yep. Yeah. So we're
That firing order is wrong on that bank. I
Yeah.
just about guarantee. Blew out number one, so now we're looking for the next one to pop out. That'll be the next one in the firing order. So just as small
Okay, I
a
got
tap as you can give it.
I got all of them in here.
Stop.
Oh, that
Okay,
was
so
the back
that
one.
was my second
7.
one back. So it's going to be 7 after 1. If we take that in reverse the order, I'll bet it fixes it. But we'll just keep going.
Yeah, we did.
Give it another tiny tap.
One open. Yep.
Okay, now I got my fourth one back.
And we got second.
Okay, another tiny one. Whoa, you.
Fucking launched all of them.
Automatic.
I'm sure we know 7's next. So you know what? It's going to match the Enzo. I think the Enzo was 153624, but from the back. Go ahead, do a tiny one. I got it. Put them all back in. Just you're going to do it slow, but I'm going to slow mo it so I can see how they come out.
Oh, sorry.
Go. Go. Okay, so that's 11 first. Here's number 11. That's really, it's counting from the back. That's the fifth one because the sixth one's 12. Based on its cylinder order, it's 7, 11, 9, 8, 10, 12 down that side. So, and I know 12 fires before 1, which means it's at the end. So 7 must be after 1.
We're really close to figuring it out with the paper towels by telling when it's coming up. But this engine, big pistons, they move up fast. Even if the valves are open, it might be pushing them out a little bit. It's so hard to say. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the valve covers off, and then we're gonna actually see where the cam lobes are. And that's gonna tell us what cycle is coming next and what cylinder is coming next. Whether it's at top dead center with the valves open, whatever it is, we're gonna be able to see what's going on. So we can go through the entire firing order and dial it in 100%. It's milky in the oil. That's water mixing with oil.
Yeah, 100%. But let's figure out the TDC thing so we could make so it'll run next time.
Yeah.
We could run it again, make sure it starts and fires, and then shut it off, and then you can figure out whatever. It's got one going where it's not supposed to go. Another one. That's it. So TDC's right around here. So now we need to work out the next one that is coming up on compression on this side.
So right now, number 12, the front one is intake valve fully open.
Because it'd be 60. It shouldn't be there. It should be on the compression stroke already. It's gonna be.
So instead of having to take out the steering rack, which would be a pain, and using the ratchet, don't do this at home. Greg and Mike basically cut a wire so that they can jump the starter, and that way, instead of running it through the ECU, which jumps it way more than you can really control it, Mike's just tapping it real quick, getting to crank just a little bit every single time. Not an ideal or safe way to do it, but if it works, it works.
Okay, that's 12. Go ahead. Okay, that's 11. Go ahead. Another one. No, I bet it leaked past one of them. Okay.
One.
Right, and I got 10 over here at the same time. So I don't know who was first, 1 or 10.
Before or after, yeah.
But on this bank, 10. So now go again.
Okay.
12. Go ahead. Then I got 11. So I got 10, 12, 11. Go ahead. Go.
6.
Yeah. Keep going. Go again. Okay, now I got
3.
I got 8. There. So you know what?
1,
Go
2,
back to the slow-mo.
3.
We're sticking them all down.
Yeah.
Just have you crank it. 'Cause that works fucking awesome.
Yeah. Very scientific.
It looks like the firing order that we had put into the ECU is correct. Shane's saying the only other thing that we can think of that makes a lot of sense is that these cams are adjustable, and they usually have a range of 60 or so degrees each direction. If it's supposed to be 0 and it's forcing it to go 60 degrees off, then it's way off as far as where the valves are supposed to be opening when the cylinders are firing. And if the valves are open when the cylinders are trying to fire, it's not going to fire. You're not going to get enough compression, so that's why this side wasn't running. That's our guess currently, but we're going to put it back together. We're going to leave the cam control stuff off. We'll leave just the cam sensors. Hopefully the camshafts stay at their 0 points and not have any control to move back and forth. So we'll see what happens. All right, we're gonna try to fire it up again, and hopefully we'll get all 12 cylinders, sorry, to run now. It's been a long day, guys. It's been a long day.
So the plug came out wet, right?
The plugs, you said?
When you pulled them out before, they came out wet.
Yeah.
It would be trying to pop and bang like crazy if it had spark at the wrong time, except if it's on the exhaust stroke. And even then, it usually tries to pop out the exhaust.
Yeah.
This is acting a lot more like there's no spark.
Yeah, I know. It's and we had fuel obviously because it was wet. Ready?
Yeah.
That's sparking.
So that leaves it firing at the wrong time. Or not actually having fuel. Look at this, it's gonna try and run.
Well, there's no fuel.
Hang on, let me take all these other coils off. Take all the coils off but 12.
You didn't choose disconnects. We should have no fuel going to it.
No fuel, we can't have spark with the coils not plugged in.
Ignition's off, and I'm only doing start, so it should have no sparks.
Yeah.
Give me the finger.
I might actually be able to, yeah, that's not bad.
Things are happening.
It's sparking, right? The glove's full, so it's at somewhere near top of compression stroke.
Yeah.
And it's on the correct tape mark on the balancer. So, I mean, look, what we're looking for is something that's so far off it won't run. And we obviously have a degree of error here, but I mean, it's not like we're off by half.
No.
Yeah.
I can't see why it won't run.
Yeah.
So you want to film us leaving?
We are not going to finish the car tonight, by the way, guys. So this is going to continue. We have it running on 6 cylinders, but not on 12. And this is a V12. And we need to get all 12 cylinders running. And that's going to take some time. We've got some other issues as well that we need to sort through that are definitely not right. Made a lot of progress today as far as getting a lot of the systems together and checking things. And we found some issues, we solved some issues, and there's some very unresolved issues. So we have to go back through this thing. We are not trying to make some event this weekend. I want to go through this thing with a fine tooth comb and make sure everything is right. That means we're gonna pull all this crap back off the car and maybe even take the engine back out and put it on an engine stand, because punching over here and trying to dial all this stuff in is not the way to do it. I think that the tune is right. We checked all of these things. We went through the entire system 10 times, and I think the firing order is correct and everything else. We have spark, we have fuel. Our theory right now is that cam control module that sits on the front of the cam was stuck in the wrong position, because when we put it on and cranked the engine over by hand, everything was lining up over and over and over again. It was not off. It was not off by a little bit or anything. It was dead on every single time. And I made sure of that. You guys got to see some real behind the scenes stuff that you are definitely not gonna see on anybody else's channel, because they're gonna cut everything out. They're not gonna show you anything bad. They're only gonna show you good stuff. So this does happen sometimes. It is a very, very custom project, and it's a mechanical being. It is, yeah, everything has to be right for it to run perfectly. So we're gonna make sure all of those things are right, but it's definitely not there today.